Hello everybody, I am Quinn Buckland, author of The Engine Runs the World, Fallen Gods, and the 1099th. And today I want to talk about reviews. Typically, or more importantly, the reviews that I give, because I am a book reviewer. And I special in indie books, typically ones that come from independent publishers or through self-publishing. And, well, as such, I do tend to look at other reviewers as well and see just how they do things and, try and find ways to improve how I do my reviews. But I've always found that I do my reviews a little differently than a lot of others. A lot of people do tend to do stuff like plan out the reviews, they'll script it, they will write down their points. I don't typically do that. I kind of like to have my reviews a little more off the cuff. I find it comes a little bit more honest. I've tried scripting my reviews before, especially really early on, and I found that I just wasn't quite as honest with myself on how I felt about the book, and I found that I wasn't just quite as... I just wasn't quite as me. I came off as a little bit more robotic. I wasn't coming off as a real person. So, with that said, I do tend to do my reviews off the cuff. From there, I split my reviews into 5 different segments. Into plot, characters, writing, imagination and research, and the ending. Now, as I go on, I might change these up. Odds are I won't. I've been running this for quite some time. But, look, I kind of want to explain how I do things here. So, with these 5, I rank them out of 5. So, if it's a really, really good plot, it gets a 5 out of 5. Now, each point counts to a certain amount of points, each adding up to an eventual percentage and going into a out of 10 final score. So, 1 point, or 1 out of 5 is 1. I never give 0, there's always something there, but if I genuinely don't like it, it gets a 1. 2 is 5 points, and that's not very good. 3 is 10 points, that's middle of the road. 4 is 15 points, and 5 is 20, the best that you can possibly get. Now, with plot, I tend to be fairly lenient with it. Like, there's only so many styles of plot that a person can come up with, so I really rank it as a form of individuality and just inventiveness with it. I mean, we've all seen a dream world. We've all seen spaceships and starfights and stuff like that. We've all seen the future world in books and literature, in movies and shows and stuff like that. So it really does come down to just how much I, A, enjoyed the plot, and B, its general inventiveness. From there I move on to the characters. And characters are a bit more of a topic that I can get into, because there are times where I just don't like the characters, or I don't like the main character but the side characters are great, or vice versa, and I have to kind of get into all the characters in order for it to be a straight up 5 out of 5. This is the one where a lot of people tend to lose some points because somewhere along the line either the main character loses me or the side characters do. It's a pretty common thing in a lot of books, so I mean, even getting a 4 out of 5 is not that bad, and it's actually pretty common. Writing. Writing is almost always a 5 out of 5. It's kind of that saving grace that a lot of books tend to get, because unless it's particularly poorly written, or unless it is genuinely a bad book, it's going to be a 5 out of 5. Basically, if they get an editor and actually take care as to how they write their book, there's a pretty good chance that I'm going to give a really good score with it. And so long as the book doesn't lose me as well. If I have to go back and see what I'd already read, then, that's a bit of a bad thing, and that tends to lose points with writing. But for the most part, it's very, very rare that I give less than 5 out of 5 for writing. Imagination and research. Imagination goes a long way. Research goes a long way. The two tend to go hand in hand as well. Say, for example, if I'm reading a fantasy book, there's not going to be much in the way of research. Like, there's going to be a little bit here and there, because, yeah, research is a part of the entire writing process, and, they're just bits and pieces that need to be researched. But imagination is what really comes into the prime focus when it comes to fantasy. Where it's almost the opposite with a lot of science fiction. I mean, obviously, depending on what style of science fiction it is. If it's more spacey, then yeah, a bit more research than imagination would go into that. But, you'd still get that imagination because you need imagination to write the books. It kind of gets scored as to how much research I can tell that the person has done, as well as the amount of imagination that they put into the story. It's definitely one that can either go one way or the other in terms of how I rank it. It's very rarely in the middle. It's fairly often pretty high up there because a lot of authors, at least the ones that I've read, have taken a lot of care and have taken a lot of steps to make their books as best as they possibly can. So with that said, imagination and research does tend to be another one of those saving graces that an author just tends to get because I can tell how much care got put into it. So yeah, that's just. And then we get into the ending, and the ending is another one of those that I can really delve into because there are some endings that I just don't care for, and there's some ending styles that I just don't care for, and it really just depends on what meshes with me and my particular style and taste for an ending. For example, I really, really enjoy when the main character bites it at the end, provided, the story makes sense toward that sort of ending. But there have been some books where the story does point toward it and nothing happens. The main character just gets away. I'm not quite okay with that because the story for the whole time has been pointing at the main character going, yeah, you're gonna die. Or you have a fairly decent possibility of dying from this. So basically what it comes down to is if the ending fits what the book is already portraying and, if it just matches my particular style of how I would want a book to end, then it's going to get a pretty good mark. It doesn't always have to end in doom and gloom. Like, if a book is, like, for example, I read a romance not too long ago, and yeah, a romance does not, like, a death at the end of that one would not really fit the narrative. So, if it fits, then absolutely I like what it does. But for the most part, I'm not going to complain if it's not. It just has to fit. But yeah, with all those put together, this is kind of how I determine what kind of a score that a book gets. And there are times where I have not really enjoyed the book, but there have been those saving graces like the imagination and research and writing that are both done really, really well that have actually saved a lot of points for the book because there are times where I find the plot nonsensical, I've hated the characters, and the ending irritated me, but with the imagination and research and writing being as good as they were, it has saved the book. I'm not getting into which book it is. You want to know, watch my reviews. And that kind of does bring into the whole why I tend to have a little bit more positive reviews as well. Well, I also tend to want to spin things where if I do have a critique, I do try and make it as constructive as possible. I'm not just going to straight up say, well, this book sucked, or this sucked, or that was just really, really bad. It's like, well, no, I'm going to try and be constructive about it. Like, I'm not going to go, well, this is what I would have done with it, because that's, A, not helpful, and B, completely rude. But at the same time, I just get into what I would have liked to have seen, or something along along the lines of what I would have liked to have seen. That tends to, well, it has so far at the very least gotten some pretty good reactions from authors because they tend to be really receptive to constructive criticism. Like, critiques are something that is an inevitability when it comes to writing. In art in general, that's kind of what it all is. And from there, it's just kind of one of those things. Like, we all have to deal with reviews. I'm an author. I have to deal with them. But if they can be as constructive as possible, they definitely go way easier. They come out way nicer. And authors are a bit more receptive to what a person has to say. I hate the reviews, not just to my own books, but to other books that just say this is really, really bad, or this really, really sucks, and gives absolutely no context, or very little context as to why. So I try and give as best feedback as I can as well. And I do have authors coming back to me wanting me to read more of their books. So I guess I'm doing a fairly decent job with my reviews. I mean, nobody's ever complained about it being off the cuff. Nobody's complained about how I review or anything like that. But yeah, that's basically how I review my books and why I review things the way that I do. I hope that all makes sense. And frankly, I'm really enjoying doing what I'm doing, so I hope to read more books in the future. But in any case, that's all I got for you guys today, so have a good one.